we factored by our greatest common factor, right? And that's where you have a binomial, so two parts, both of them have x's, one has an x squared, one has an x. We did what I call normal factoring, where your a term or the thing in front of the x squared is 1. And then we did the factor by grouping and or slide and divide and slide, whatever we're calling it. We are going to transition sort of out of factoring. We still have to use factoring, but we're going to start talking about completing the square, which again, hopefully you guys did do this in Algebra 1. We're not actually going to complete the square today, though. We're just going to do two different things that prepare us for completing the square. So section 3.5, we're going to spend about 3 days on this. So we're going to solve quadratic equations by using the square root property. So some of you might have noticed the other day when I taught you the difference of squares, it's a little silly because this thing, what would this be as a factored form? X squared minus 49. I heard it. Say it louder. 7. Okay, so you'd have x plus 7 and x minus 7, right? You guys remember that? And so then you'd have your solution is plus or minus 7. There's another way to do that problem, though. If you added the 49 over, so if you had x squared equals positive 49 over here, couldn't you just take a square root of both sides? And when we take a square root, don't you just add a plus or minus? So we did it factoring when there's probably, I don't want to say an easier way, but a pretty easy way. So that's what completing the square lets us do. As a note, not all quadratic equations have solutions that are whole numbers. So we are going to be back into simplifying square roots, right? Looking for a buddy to break out of jail. We're going to have complex things that I squared or I. So we have to use those again. So example 1 wants us to solve a quadratic equation with rational and irrational and complex roots. I don't know why I put 2 ands there. Bad English. So what we want to do here, in the last section, I told you always to set this equal to 0. Throw that away. We are no longer doing that. Okay, so I'm going to put a little note here. Don't set equal to 0. By not setting this equal to 0, can someone tell me, this would be a normal factoring, what two factors that multiply to 4 add to negative 4? Negative 2 and negative 2. So we could factor this as x minus 2 times x minus 2 equals 25. I had told you guys last Wednesday when I was here, this has a special form. This is our perfect square trinomial. And all that means is that instead of writing this factor twice, what if I wrote this as x minus 2 squared equals 25? Is that okay? You guys understand why those two are equal? Okay, so once I have something squared, let's just take the square root of both sides. Things not to forget when you take the square root. Make sure you add a plus or minus, because you have a positive and a negative solution. So when you take the square root of this whole parenthesis, you will have x minus 2 equals plus or minus, this one's nice, what's the square root of 25? 5. Okay, you can either add the 2 over here, but then you have to be careful with this plus or minus, or you can split it ahead of time. I'm going to add the 2 right now because I want to solve for x. But when you add the 2, make sure you add it right after the equal sign. So you'll have x equals 2 plus or minus 5. Because this is two distinct solutions. You will have x equals 2 plus 5 and x equals 2 minus 5. Right? That's all that plus or minus means, is you have a positive 5 and a negative 5. And you should have two solutions, because if you think about a parabola hitting that x-axis, should hit it twice. Once if we're lucky. So then our solutions would be x equals 7 and negative 3. And on Go Formative, we would enter those as 7, comma, negative 3. What do we think? Terrible? Doable? Okay. We need to see another example? Yeah. Obviously. Hopefully. Okay. So our next example, and I promise this will always happen today. X squared plus 6x plus 9. What multiplies to 9 but adds to 6? 3 and 3. Since they are both the same, you don't need to write this step where you write them separate. If they are exactly the same, you can jump right to x plus 3 squared equals 18. You guys comfortable doing that? Once you have this thing squared, you can take the square root. What do I need to remember to add when I take a square root? Plus or minus. Ooh, is 18 a perfect square? No. So what do I need to do with that perfect square? Or not perfect square? Yeah, I need to simplify. Gotta look for buddies. Oh, nice. Look at you. Yeah, so it'd be 2 and 9. Is that you, Emily? Yeah. Yeah. So your pair is here. You have 2 and 9, and then you have a pair of 3s. So anything that has a buddy can bust out of jail. If he doesn't have a buddy, he can't. So the 2 is stuck. So we have x plus 3 equals plus or minus a 3 got out, but the 2 is stuck inside jail. I do want to solve for x, so I'm going to subtract 3, and make sure you subtract it from right after the equal sign, just so you don't mix up where that plus or minus is. So we have x equals negative 3 plus or minus square root of 2. Now, this one we broke into 2 exact answers. Is the square root of 2 a nice number? No. So on Go Formative today, you can leave it just like this. You cannot leave it like this because 5 is a nice number. You guys can do 2 plus 5 and 2 minus 5. But if you have a square root here, you are welcome to leave it as one thing like this. You could also, I do have in the answer key, I also have it where you could split it if you wanted to. You could write it like that. Oh, I lost my 3. You guys know pregnancy brain is starting to hit hard. Shout out if I lose something. There we go. So you can list them on Go Formative if you want, or you can just write them with the plus or minus. I have it in both ways. It's a good answer key today. So you can do it this way, or you can just list them with a comma in between. However you want to do it. Okay with this? Let's do one more. See how fast we can factor. What multiplies to 81 and adds to negative 18? Negative 9. So then I would have x minus 9 squared equals negative 36. Now what do I do? Square root. And what do I need to add when I take the square root? Plus or minus? Plus or minus 6. Look at you. Somebody's on this. Is that you again, Emily? Mm-hmm. Look at you. All right. So yeah, the square root of 36 is 6. But anytime you have a negative, you have an I. So we have x minus 9 equals plus or minus 6i. So then I have to add the 9 over. And so I'll have x equals 9 plus or minus 6i. So again, on Go Formative, you can just write it that way, or you can do 9 plus 6i, comma, 9 minus 6i. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. The next one, so I am going to do example 2. And if we don't have a ton of time for our work, I'll make it due on Tuesday instead of Monday. That's fine. You know what? Actually, no.